In today's mini lecture, I'm going to throw a lot of slides at you about fertility and childbearing around the world with a little bit of 20th century history mixed in. In some cases, the transition between slides is not particularly smooth because what I'm just basically trying to get you to do is get an overall picture of the magnitude of fertility by place and by certain characteristics. So all of these slides come from the Population Reference Bureau slide bank. Some of them are slightly more up to date than others, and in cases in which I probably really should have updated the slide, I'll fill you in on any different numbers. First one here is trends in childbearing by region. The average number of children per woman in the world, so this is total fertility rate. Around the world in the 1965-1970 period of time was roughly 4.9 children per woman. By the 2000-2005, it's about 2.7. 2010-2015 estimate actually puts that slightly lower than that, even somewhere between 2.5 and 2.6, which is continuing a decline we have been seeing for 50 years. Africa as a continent or a region has the highest fertility, currently still at about 5, maybe a little bit under that, children per woman as a whole. This is a drop of almost 2 kids per woman from the 1965-1970 time frame. Getting tired of that window popping up while I'm talking to you. All right, Asia has experienced a much steeper drop from 5.7 to 2.5 children per woman. A lot of that can be attributed to significant fertility declines in China. Latin America and the Caribbean are also down to roughly 2.5 children per woman, and mirroring some of the experiences of Asia, but many of the countries in Latin America and the Caribbean have seen fertility drops. It is in no way dominated by any one country. And in the more developed nations of the world, which this is referring to parts of North America, most of all of Europe basically, and Australia, New Zealand, and a smattering of other countries in Asia. Fertility was already low mid-century and has continued to drop well below replacement rate at 1.6 children per woman. Diverging trends in fertility reduction, this is just showing you some differences by country. In some places that all were very high fertility in the 1970-1975 time range. Egypt 5.7 down to 3.3, India 5.4 down to 3.1. There, maybe that'll stop now. 5.2 in Indonesia down to 2.4. The interesting examples here are Iran, that started out very high at 6.4 and came down to 2.1. Turkey has come down to 2.5, Indonesia 2.4. None of these are below replacement level yet, but they're getting close. Yemen is our example of a country that has remained very high fertility. Examples of countries that are reaching fertility, replacement level fertility. Azerbaijan, that is in far Eastern Europe / Central Asia. Chile in South America, Iran, Mauritius in Africa, Thailand and Tunisia. These are all countries which have reached or are right on the cusp of replacement fertility level, a significant drop since 1960 to 1965. So in that 40-year time span, going from very high levels of fertility to much lower levels of fertility. The 10 places with the lowest total fertility worldwide in 2000 to 2005, I don't believe that this order has really particularly changed much in the last 5 to 7 years. So we still have a couple of places that those of you who are not particularly familiar with Asian geography may not be as aware of. My pronunciation may be slightly off here, but the Macau Special Administrative Region and Hong Kong. Everybody's heard of Hong Kong, not everybody's heard of Macau. These are both city-states. They are essentially a big city that serves as its own semi-independent. In both of these cases, they are not necessarily fully independent from China, although they may have been at one time, or in the case of Hong Kong, so on and so forth. Anyway, extremely extremely low fertility in these two areas. But that's not surprising given that they are completely urban. Ukraine, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Slovenia are the next four, and again, closer to our current day, these are still very high up here. Down here we have Bulgaria and Belarus. Moldova, what do all of these places have in common? So let's skip Korea for right now. They are all in Eastern Europe, which as a region has the lowest fertility in the world. Republic of Korea at 1.23 also has extremely low fertility. Patterns of fertility decline since the middle of the 20th century. These are just a couple of example countries to show you essentially some different patterns of decline. Uganda, you've already seen some data for Uganda in our lab exercises in class. They have not experienced fertility decline in the past 50 years, 60 years. In fact, a slight increase in that time. Kenya increased a little bit and then slowly started to come down, still at above 5 children per woman, but hopefully will continue to drop, sort of stabilize since the mid-90s. Colombia started its decline in the 1960s. South Korea started its decline earlier than that, after a post-Korean War increase in fertility, then a continuing drop and decline to now it's very low and well below replacement level point. Women of childbearing age, the number of women aged 15 to 49. This impacts how many children are born regardless of the number of children per woman. So far we've only looked at the number of children per woman, which sort of hides the actual impact of fertility. Fertility rates per woman can decline like crazy, but if there are a lot of women in childbearing age, the number of children will continue to grow. So in 1950 worldwide there were 0.62 billion, so 620 million women of childbearing age in the world. By these include projections. By 1990, 1.32 billion. By 2010, there were 1.76 billion. And this number is projected to continue to increase until around 2050, 2060, when it will stabilize and decline. So we can continue to have fewer children, but there are more women having them. This graph shows this very clearly. This is the number of women of childbearing age compared to the number of children born per woman. So we see the number of children born per woman dropping, but the number of women increasing. Wanted births. There's a difference between the births that people intend to have and births that people do not intend to have, and this is the gap that many population policies are aimed at dealing with. This is the late 1990s. This is based on attitudinal surveys and other fertility surveys that took place worldwide. They are estimates based on approximately 60% of births worldwide. About 3/4 of all births are wanted, about 11% not wanted at all, and about 16% would have preferred to have waited on them a little bit. Here's some more about unintended births for some specific countries. 22% of the births in Cameroon in 2004 were not wanted, 45% in Kenya, Madagascar, 16%, so on. This will tie in with our discussions about contraception and control. Age at marriage. This is important. This is what part of our determinants of fertility, which we will talk about more later. Infant mortality and childbearing by region. There is a relationship between the average number of children per woman and infant mortality. That is very, very clear here. Africa with highest average number of children and highest infant mortality. Asia, Latin America, and the Caribbean, and the more developed regions. Fertility and education. Another thing that we see fertility vary by. And this is one that you can use the Gapminder data visualizing tool to see the relationships yourself over time. Larger percentage of girls enrolled in secondary school equals lower fertility, more or less, unless you're in Palestine, the Palestinian territory, Morocco, Uruguay, all interesting outliers. Fertility rate by education. Example countries in Mali of those with no education higher than those with secondary or higher, and this is true in all of these example countries. Association between fertility and poverty. Generally, the more impoverished a nation is, the higher its fertility rate is, but not entirely. There's quite a few very highly impoverished countries over here that don't have particularly high fertility. Mongolia is a fantastic example. Children born to a woman in her lifetime by wealth. Again, higher wealth, lower fertility. This is also associated with childbearing, infant mortality, all sorts of things. Fertility among poorer and wealthier women. The total fertility rate in Zambia, 96-2001. You can see that while fertility dropped slightly in Zambia among those who were poorer, it dropped more noticeably among those who are richer. Interestingly enough, in Colombia, actually went up or stayed stable among the richest, dropped a little bit for the poorest. There's not a whole lot of room for dropping here in Colombia. This is not an unsurprising pattern. Female labor force participation, we don't have as much information here, much fewer countries, but generally speaking, the more your labor force participation, the lower your fertility, but it's not as strong of a relationship as we've seen in other things. And that is the end of this first splash of data about fertility and its related social variables.